Good evening, everyone. I'm audible to you. Okay, we'll start the session. Before that, let me just revise what we have discussed in our yesterday session. So yesterday we have discussed the examples of the IP addressing. I'm audible to you, all of you. Okay, so then let me continue. So I'm just revising what we have discussed yesterday. Then after that, we have discussed yesterday that the devices can be connected using the star topology. So that comes under physical topology. After that, we discuss the other type of topology which is used to understand the transmission of the data, which we can't see, but we can understand with the help of the logical topology, which consists of two models. What are they? Work group model and domain model. So yesterday we have discussed about work group model. Yesterday we have discussed about work group model. So what is the main advantage with work group model? Um, we don't have to create work group model. Whenever we install either server OS or client OS, by default, all the machines will be in work group model. By default, yes. But in that, what is the disadvantage? What is the disadvantage in that? Everything has to be done in every machine. Like we took the example of a users. So if you want any user to log in from any machine means, if we are using the workgroup model, the user which we create from workgroup model machine is called local user. So if you want the user to log in from any machine means we have to create all user account in all machine. So like that, if you are using the workgroup model, everything has to be done in every machine. So Like we discussed, if it is 100 machine and 100 employees are there, so we need to create about 10,000 euro user accounts. So will you create that many accounts? Not only that, if a user left the organization, you have to delete the for one user, the user will have to be deleted from all the machine. So this is the big headache with a work group model. That is the reason no company uses the work group model. So now, yesterday we have done the practical. So we discussed from the work group model, if you create a user, that user is called local user. So if you create a user from the work group machine, it is called local user. So local user can log in which machine that user is created in that machine only, not from other machine. So we have discussed yesterday in the workgroup model, the authentication takes place through NTLM protocol. So this NTLM protocol will check user credential in the SAM database file in workgroup model. If the username and password is matched, then only that user can log in. So these are the things which we have discussed in yesterday's session. Okay. So yesterday we created a user from the workgroup machine. That user is called local user. So how to create a local user, you know? Yes. So local user will be created when our machine is in workgroup. So from the workgroup machine, to create a user, that user is called local user. Okay. Now let us come to the today's session. So yesterday when we create a user, local user, what is the disadvantage with local user? So you can log in with that user in that machine only. But in the real time, do you get the same machine every day? No. So if the user is sitting next day in some other machine, can he able to log in? No. So as the administrator, what you have to do? You have to go to that machine again, create the user account. Okay. So this is the problem with the work group model. If anything you have to do, you have to go to each and every machine and do it. So to avoid this type of problem, we uses the other model. What is the other model? Yes, anyone remember what is the other model which we have to discuss today? Logical topology consists of two models. One is work group model, which we have discussed yesterday. Very nice. Yes, Irfan, Abdul, yes, very nice. So today we need to continue our session from domain model. So what is the topic we are going to discuss today? So today onwards, the main topics will start. And today onwards, you'll have multiple practicals. And every day you will have lengthy practical from today onwards. So yesterday we have discussed this point, yes? Yes, we have completed work group model. Now, today our focus will be on domain model. So first point you have to remember, work group model is called peer-to-peer, means one-to-one model. There will be no server, no client, and one computer will not have any control over other computer. Okay? Okay, so in work group model, who has to create or who will create the work group model? No one. By default in Windows, we have two OS, client and server OS. So whenever you install either client OS or server OS in Windows, by default that machine will be in work group model. So how to check that? Yesterday I've shown you, yes. And if you create a user from work group model, what type of user will be created? Local user. So in which machine I created that user? In that machine only that user can log in, not from the other machine. If you want that user to log in, you have to create the user in that machine also. That is a problem in workgroup model. So to overcome that problem, we have domain model. So domain model will be created default. Workgroup model is created default. So same way, the domain model will be also created by default. Tell me, yes, no. Domain model will be created by default? Yes or no? No, it will be not created. So domain model will not be created by default. So who has to create this domain model? Domain model has to be created by the administrator. So it is not created default. So domain model has to be created by root. Who is root? Administrator. So this is also called as domain model is also called as client server model, because in domain model at least one machine should be made as a server. You can have more than one server, but minimum one server. So using that server, administrator can provide the security and the permission as per our requirement for the computers in the domain. So I repeat, domain model has to be created by administrator. So in the domain model, at least one machine has to be made as a server, remaining client. So using that server, we can able to control and manage all the computers by using the permission policies. So we can protect the system, sorry, we can protect the data as well as share the data in the domain model with the help of the server which we have to create. So this makes it easy. The administrator job will become easier once you make a domain model, because in domain model, whatever changes you are doing, you have to do from DC machine, and that effect will be there on all computers. So in workgroup model, everything has to be done in every machine, whereas in domain model, everything has to be done only in the DC machine, that is server, which we have to make. Domain model has to be created by admin by making one of the machine as server. So everything will be done from the server, and that effect will be there on all client and users. So this is the concept of the domain model. So domain model has to be created by administrator. Yes, domain model has to be created by the administrator. By domain model consists of what? At least one server, one client. Whereas in the workgroup model, no server, no client. So domain model is created by the root, who is root administrator, by configuring or by making server, at least one machine we have to make server. So that server here is called as a DC. So that using this DC or server, we can able to control and manage all the users and computer by applying them the permission through which we can provide the security as well as sharing. So why the domain model is used everywhere in the company? Because in domain model, if you make any changes on the server, that change will be applied to all the computers. Okay. So what is the difference in workgroup model? Everything has to be done in every machine. Whereas in the domain model, whatever you do in the server, that effect will be there on all computers. So which model makes the administrator job more simple and easy? Domain model. That is the reason every company uses only domain model. So here server means DC, that we have to make it. So in domain model, the administrator has to create the domain by model by making the server. Here server means DC. So using this DC, we can, as a administrator, we can able to control and manage all the computers. So the administrative job becomes simple and easy with the domain model, because whatever change the administrator does on the server, that changes will become effective or implemented immediately. that whatever changes we do on the server, that effect of that will be there on all computers automatically. So which makes the administrator job simple and easy with the domain model. That is the reason every company uses only domain model. So here, whatever changes you are, so whatever changes you are doing here on the server, that effect will be there automatically on all computers. So which makes the administrator job very simple and easy. So with the domain model, managing the network, managing the network becomes simple and easy. So by using domain model, administration becomes easy. Administration means managing the network becomes easy. Because here, one change if you do, that change will be reflected to all computers. So that is the reason every company uses only domain model. I hope you are following. Okay. Now see here, yesterday we have completed this work group model, yes? So in work group model, the authentication takes place through NTLM protocol using the SAM database file. Now we have to start today from the domain model. So today, in today's session, we have to understand three things. First of all, what is ADDS? So if you want to work in a domain model, you need to understand about three things, or we should be aware about three things. So in the domain model, as the administrator, we should be aware about three things. What are those three things? So as a administrator, we should be aware about three things in domain model. What are those three things? First of all, in domain model, today we are going to discuss first of all what is meant by ADDS. After ADDS, we need to make it as a domain controller. Domain controller. ADDS, domain controller. Then what is meant by domain? So these three things we should know in the domain model. Then we can understand the domain model. So these are the three things we need to discuss in today's session. I repeat once again, in today's session, which we are discussing today's session, we are discussing what? The active of first class. Like this, we have about four classes remaining. So we'll start first with ADDS, after that domain controller, then the domain. So once we know these three things, we can understand the domain model. So to understand the domain model, we should be aware about these three things: ADDS, domain controller, and domain. So first of all, we'll try to understand the domain model. So in the domain model, so who has to create the domain model? It will be created default? No. Domain model has to be created by the administrator. What is the name of the administrator? Root. So domain model has to be created by the root. So in domain model, everything has to be done only in domain model is also called server client model because here one of the machine has to be made as a server. Here server means domain controller. So in the domain model, which is created by the need to be created by the root. So domain model is nothing but it's a centralized administration. So domain model is nothing but centralized administration. Centralized administration. So centralized administration is called as domain model, which is created by the root. So to make our network centralized or domain model, we should be aware about these three things: ADDS, domain controller, and domain. Okay. Now we'll start the domain model. So if you create a user from domain model, what we call that user? That user is called domain user. If you create a user from workgroup model, that is called local user. If you create a user from domain model, that is called domain user. So domain user can log in from any machine. Domain user can log in from any machine, any system. Okay. So domain user can log in from any system, provided that system should be a part of the domain. Now here, we have three machines. One machine is client OS, another client OS, this is server OS. So if you want to work in a domain model, which is also called as client server model, domain model is also referred as server client model. In here, at least one server should be there. Okay. So now domain model has to be created by administrator. So in the domain model, if you create a user, so domain model is created by administrator by, so how we will create the administrator? By configuring. So if you want to make a domain model as admin, you have to configure what? Server. So that server here is called DC. So once you make the DC, if you create a user, that user is called domain user. So domain user can log in from any system. So in the domain model, user will be created only from the one machine, and that user can log in from any computer within the domain. So this is your domain model. So here, these are the two client OS, this is server OS. So we can make this machine as a server. So here server means we are talking about DC. DC means domain controller. So here, if you have created Now here in the domain model, where the domain user will be created. So to make this machine as a server, first we have to install, to make the domain model, first we have to install the domain service. What is the domain service we have? ADDS. So when we install the ADDS, will it become the DC? No. After installing the ADDS, we have to configure. Configure. So how to configure? We will discuss today practically. So first install the ADDS, which is a domain service, then configure or click on the flag to configure it as a domain controller. So we have to configure to make it DC. DC means domain controller. So once you become the domain controller, if you create a user, that user is called domain user. So once you create a user, that user is called domain user. Domain user can log in from any machine. So if you create a user from the DC machine, that user is called domain user. So if I create a user now, can this user log in? User account is created in every machine? No, only in the server. Now this is the client. So can the client sorry, this user is created, domain user. So this can domain user log in from the client machine? Yes or no? Tell me. Can the domain user, which is created from the DC machine, can be login able to from the client machine? Yes. Yes. What is the advantage of domain user? Domain user will be created from the DC machine, that is server, and that user can log in from any machine. So domain user can log in from this machine as well as this machine. So domain user can log in from the any machine, provided that machine are the part of the DC, join into the DC. So domain user can log in from any machine, provided that machine is the part of the domain, or that machine is joined into the domain. How to join? We'll see tomorrow. Okay, up to this, have you followed everyone? Are you following to this? Okay. So now, when you are trying to log in the domain model, user will be created from the server. That user can log in from any machine, provided that machine is a part of the domain or it is joined into the domain, a part of the domain. Now, user one can log in from any machine. Yes, domain user created from the DC can log in from any machine. So whether the user is created here, no, here, whether the user is created here, no, then how it will log in? So what is the advantage with domain model? Domain user will be created from the server, and that user can log in from any machine which is part of the domain. No need to create the user account in every machine. So now user is created in the DC machine with the name U1. Can I log in with the U2? The U2 account is not created. Can I log in as a U2? No. So here also authentication will be taken place. Yes. So if you have not created the user in the DC, like user 2 or user 4, User for your user you are not created. Now you're trying to log in as a user for user. Can you log in? No, cannot log in unless until the user is created there. So user has to be created in DC machine and that user can log in from any computer, provided that computer is a join into the domain or part of the domain. Okay. Now here a user is created in DC, but the user does not have the username and password. Can he log in? No. Now the user one is created, but the user is trying to log in as a user two. So any user can log in from any machine. So in the workgroup model, the authentication takes place through which model? Here, in the workgroup model, the authentication takes place through, yesterday we have discussed, no, NTLM protocol, where the NTLM protocol will check the user information in user database file, that is SAM, yes. So in the domain model also, security is there, authentication is there, yes. So in the domain model also, authentication takes place. So in the domain model, which is also called as, which is also called as so in the domain model, we are discussing now domain model. In the domain model, the authentication takes place through Kerberos protocol. Kerberos protocol. Kerberos protocol is used for authentication purpose. So in the domain model, authentication takes place through the Kerberos protocol. So this Kerberos protocol will check username and password in user database file. In user database file, the authentication will be checked. So what is the file name here? In domain model, what is the file name? mtts.dit. Directory, new technology, directory service, directory information tree. So the Kerberos protocol will check here the user detail. Okay. Now come to the location of the C drive. Location of the mtts.dit file. So what is the location now? Where this Kerberos protocol will be there? Location C drive, Windows, C drive, Windows. One second. Now the location of the Kerberos protocol is okay. So you have to go to C drive, Windows, Windows folder. Inside the Windows folder, one folder will be created with the name NTDS. Inside this NTDS, there will be one file, ntds.dit. So this is the file where Kerberos protocol will check the username and password is matching or not. So what is the full form of ntts.dit? New technology. So what is that? ntts.dit file, new directory, sorry, new technology directory, new technology directory service dot dot directory dot directory information. So this is the location. Sorry, first the full form of the entities.dit is new technology directory service directory information tree. It is tree. And where it is created, this file, once we make the domain controller, this file will be created automatically. That file name is entities.dit. Okay, so I repeat once again, a domain model is also called as centralized model or centralized administration. So in the domain model, authentication takes place through the Kerberos protocol. Kerberos protocol will check the user detail in user database file. Or you can say, instead of user, you can say this is a centralized database file. What is the name of that centralized database file? Where all user information will be stored. Centralized database file, because this will be present in the DC. So what is the file name? entities.dit. Full form, new technology, new technology directory service dot directory information tree. So it is the full form. So in the workgroup model, the file is SAM. In the domain model, the file is entities.dit. In workgroup model, the NTLM protocol will check here, Kerberos protocol will check user credential. So now the user one can log in from any machine. User is created from the server, that is DC, but that user can log in from any machine. So if the user is not created from the DC, can I log in with that user from any machine? No. First, the user has to be created from the DC machine. Then that user can log in from any machine which is the part of the domain. So here Kerberos protocol will check in entities.dit. This user name and password given is correct or not. If it is matched, the access will be granted. The user can log in. Same user can log in from other machine, yes. Okay. So now we will move towards to make the domain model. First, we have to have server OS. Using this server OS, we have to first to make the domain controller. First we have to install a service. That service is called domain service. How do you make your network centralized? First install the First install the domain service. What is the name of the domain service in Microsoft operating system? The domain service name is what? Through which we'll make our network domain model. The most important topic in our MCSE course is, yes, I'm giving you the hint. Active Directory, yes, 5 sessions are there. Today is the first session of the Active Directory. So if you have two machines and uh, you want to create a user from one machine and log in from other machine without creating there. So will it be happening in the workgroup model? No, it has to be mod. It can happen only in the domain model. So in the domain model, basically what we are going to do in domain model, what we'll do? We have to first make one server. Server means here domain controller to which we can able to control and manage all the users and computer. So if you want to make your network centralized or domain model, first thing you have to do is that you have to install the ADDS. So can the ADDS install in client machine? No, it will be available in the server operating system only. So if you want to make your network centralized or domain model, first you have to install a domain service. What is the name of the domain service which we are using in Linux? Sorry, which we are using in Windows? Domain service in Windows, Active domain service, whereas the domain service in Linux, LDAP, here it is called Active Domain Service, ADDS. In Linux it is called LDAP, 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 Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. Now, what is ADDS? So ADDS is a database service. It is a database service. So what is this a database service? So database service, ADDS, stores the information of all users, computer group, services, and resources. So Active Directory is a, in simple word, you have to remember it is a domain service to make our network centralized. So Active Directory, what is Active Directory? It is a domain service, a database service, which is used to make, which is used to make our network, our network, or our domain model, or our private network. So ADDS is a domain service which is used to make our network, or which is used to make our network centralized. Centralized means we have, in which machine you are installing the ADDS, that machine you have to make as a server. That is called domain controller. Once you do that, then all the users in computer you can control and manage from that domain controller. So domain controller contain the information of all users, computer group, and resources. So domain controller also contain one service that is called Kerberos protocol service. So ADDS domain controller also contain the service. Which service it contain? So ADDS is a database service which contain the information of all users, computer group, and services and resources. So it contain also, out of that many services, one more service. That service is called Kerberos. Kerberos. So using this Kerberos, So using this Kerberos protocol, it will do the authentication. Means it will allow the user to log in after checking username and password is correct or not. Domain service in Windows is ADDS. In Linux, it is LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. LDAP in Windows. In Linux, domain model only. Domain service in Windows only we are discussing ADDS. In Linux, it is LDAP. Are you following? So if you want to make the network centralized, we have to make domain model. For that, first install the ADDS. So that can be done on server OS, not on client OS. So once you install the ADDS, on which machine you are installing the ADDS, that machine will become the domain controller? No, no, it will not become. So we have to make. How to make it? We'll see. So why we are using, what is the purpose of Active Directory? To make our network centralized. Centralized means from one machine, we can able to control and manage all users. So what is the purpose of using the Active Directory? To make our network centralized. We can also do decentralized, means we can give some of the administrative privileges to other user, so as to reduce the workload on administrator. That we will see in the OU session. So with the help of the Active Directory, we can organize our users and computer. So first of all, the purpose of Active Directory is to make our network centralized and decentralized. So once you make your, so once we organize our users, computer group, everything, then what happens? The administration or managing the network becomes simple and easy. So the purpose of the Active Directory is centrally manage and organize user account, group, computer, network resources. It also authorizes the user to easily locate the network resources. So these are the some of the important purpose or function of the Active Directory. So first of all, Active Directory provides the authentication service using the Kerberos. Second point, it will make our network centralized. Suppose if you are using the Linux, then in the Linux you have to configure LDAP. The spelling is in Linux LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. Yes, that's what I was asking you. So in Linux it is LDAP. Okay. Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. Lightweight Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. So this is used in Linux to make network domain model. Okay. So did you understood what is a ADDS? ADDS is a through which we make our network centralized. So domain model. So just by installing it will become the server model? No, after installing the ADDS, we have to make in which machine you have installed the ADDS, that machine we have to make as a domain controller. So that is the next topic. So today we need to understand, I said when we started the session, we need to understand three things. What are they? First of all, first of all, ADDS. Now domain controller. Next, domain. So these three things we should be knowing with our today's session. So have you understood everybody about the ADDS? So ADDS is a domain service through which we can make or change our network from domain model from workgroup model to domain model. So in which machine you install the ADDS, that machine has to be made as a server. So for that you have to first install the ADDS, then promote it or configure it to make it as a domain controller. So next we have to discuss the domain controller. Irfan, I didn't get you what you are asking or telling. I didn't understand. ADDS.dcd.d. I didn't get it. What do you mean by that? Okay.
Sir, actually, I was telling you asked what are the things. So ADDS, domain control, and domain. I was telling that.
Yes. Okay. I got it now. Okay. So first we have discussed about ADDS. Yes. Now we are discussing DC. So now DC means in what? In one word, what is that? DC means in one word, you can understand this as a server. DC means here server. Domain controller means server. ADDS is a service. Okay. So domain controller is a server that has to be configured. It will never be created automatically. You have to configure. Today we'll see how to configure. So it has to be configured after installing ADDS. Without that you cannot. So to configure the domain controller is a server that has to be configured after installing the ADDS to store the copy of the Active Directory. So when we configure the domain controller, one file will be created. So this is called centralized database file, which contains the complete domain information. So when we configure the DC, this file will be created, which contains the complete domain information along with one folder sysvol. So all the domain controller will have read-write option on that ntds.dit file and sysvol, except RODC. So in the RODC, we will have on this ntds.dit and sysvol file only read option, whereas in other all domain controller on ntds.dit file and sysvol folder, we will have read-write option, which we can be able to modify. But in RODC, we cannot. So RODC stands for read only domain controller. Suppose in your company, a company is having multiple branches. In one of the branch office, there is no senior administrator. So in branch office also, you need to maintain the setup domain controller. So there is no senior administrator in that branch office. You are using that branch office only for monitoring purpose. So what you can do there, you can configure RODC. RODC means read-only domain controller. So once we configure that read-only domain controller, in that also this ntds.dit and sysvol folder will be created. But in RODC, the ntds.dit file and sysvol folder will have only read option. Whereas in all other domain controller, the ntds.dit and sysvol folder will have read-write option. Read-write means we can able to modify it. But if you have read-only option, we can only read but can't modify. Okay, please remember this part. So ntds.dit is a database file which contains complete domain information. sysvol folder contain the template, means sample settings for the GPO. GPO means group policy object. GPO means group policy objects. So when we will be discussing the group policy for 2 days, we will be discussing for 2 days, we will be discussing group policy. In that, uh, you will be knowing the GPO, group policy object. For today, I'll just give you one example. Suppose the company said a particular user should not get the computer icon. So we have to write the requirement like block the computer icon or restrict the computer icon like that. So when we write it, we have to write our requirement. We have to create what GPO. And that GPO will be stored where? In the sysvol folder. All the group policy object will be stored in sysvol folder. Okay, so the complete domain information will be stored in ntds.ait file. So this file will be created when we configure the domain controller after installing the ATS. How to configure? Today we'll see. So this ntds.dit contain complete domain information, whereas sysvol folder contain group policy object information. Okay. So now the last thing for our today's theory part. Now the domain. So domain, first of all, ADDS is a service. Domain controller is a server that has to be configured by installing or after installing the ADDS. What is domain? Domain is a logical boundary. Domain is a logical boundary. In simple word, domain is a logical boundary. Domain is a logical boundary. So ADDS is a domain service. Domain controller, it is a server through which we can control and manage all our users and computer. That's why it is called domain controller. Domain means logical boundary, which is given by logical boundary, which is given by triangle, which is given by triangle. This is your domain model. And it is represented as, it is given by triangle and it is represented as domain name. Domain name means DNS name, represented as domain name. Domain name means a name with extension. Domain name means name with extension. Example, zoom.com or yourname.com, .co, .in, any extension. So domain is a logical boundary which is represented or given by triangle, and it is represented as or given by symbol triangle, and it is represented as domain name. Domain name means a name with extension. Same thing here, it is there. Domain is a logical grouping of users, computer, and object for easy administration security. So this domain get created when we configure while creating the domain controller, the domain controller also creates the domain. So you cannot have domain without domain controller. So for one domain controller will be there. So this domain get created when we configure the domain controller. So when we configure the domain controller, the domain controller also create domain. You cannot have a domain without domain controller. So for one domain controller. Domain is identified by DNS name. DNS name means name with extension. DNS name means name with extension. Example, Net BIOS name. Net BIOS name. Net BIOS name means name without extension. Name, name without extension. There is no extension in that. So that type of name is called net BIOS name. Example, net BIOS name means example. Suppose I write only one name. There is any extension? No. Now, let us say domain name or DNS name or domain name. Domain name means name with extension. A name with extension. Example, zoom.co.com.in.edu, anything, any extension. So now I repeat, domain is a logical boundary which is created when we configure the domain control. It is given by triangle and it is represented or identified by DNS name. DNS name means name with extension. So logical boundary, domain is a logical boundary which contain all users computer group under under domain name. So domain is a logical boundary which is given by triangle and it is identified or represented by DNS name, name with extension. So domain is a logical boundary under which all devices will work with a common DNS name for easy administration and security. So for one domain controller should be there. So for one domain, you cannot have more than one domain controller. For one domain controller. Okay. So now, did you got the idea about these three things? I repeat it multiple times so that you can understand it well. Did you got it? What is ADDS? ADDS is a domain service through which we can make our network centralized. So in which machine you install the ADDS, that machine has to be configured as a domain controller. What is domain controller? It is a server through which we can control and manage all the users and computer. So how to configure? First install ADDS, then configure the domain controller. How to configure? Today we'll see practically. So while configuring the domain controller, domain get created. So for one domain, compulsory one domain controller will be there. So domain means a logical boundary under which all devices will work with a common DNS name. DNS name means name with extension. So is it clear to everyone? If it is clear to everyone, we'll take a break. After the break, we'll do exactly what we have discussed theoretically, practical we'll do. So today's practical will be first in the server machine. Our machine is in work group. So we have changed it into domain model. For that, first we have to install the ADDS. Then promote it to make it as a domain controller. While configuring the domain controller, domain get created, which is given by DNS name. DNS name means name with extension. Then our domain controller will become. So how to identify the domain controller? Once we make it, we'll see. So is it clear to everybody these three terms? So we'll take a break or we will have a break. After the break, we can start the practical. It will become very clear to you. So shall we have a break? Okay. So I'll keep my mic in mute position. So all of you please just get relaxed. After the break, we'll continue. Okay, shall we start the practical? Shall we start the practical? So now we can change our machine, which is by default in workgroup model, to domain model. How to do that? So first of all, open your machine. By default, it is in workgroup. So these are our machines. So let me power on this machine. It will take some time. Meanwhile, we can discuss the So now, meanwhile, we can just see the practical step. I hope most of the people might have received the practical step file. So if anybody have not received it, you please ping to my mail ID. I'll share with you the practical step file. So today we are going to make our network centralized domain model. So for that, first thing what you have to do, you go to your DC machine, you go to your machine, which you install the server OS. So by default, it is in workgroup and it should be with the server OS. Then when you want to make this as a DC, it should be in workgroup and it should be server OS. Both our condition is fulfilled. Then you assign the static IP. How to assign, I'll show you. IP address and preferred DNS should be same, because when we configure the DC, the DNS also get installed. After that, to make this DC, will it become automatically? No. So first you have to install the ADDS. So how to install it? Earlier we have to go to the command prompt and type it DC promo, but now from 2012 they given one separate console which makes very easy installing and removing anything. So just open the server manager console, click on add roles and features, then click on next 3 times, check the box ADDS. Next 3 times, click on install. Then ADDS is installed, but it has not become the DC. So to make it DC, click on the flag and promote it to the DC. First, select a forest, last option, give some domain name. Now, when you are configuring your domain controller, domain get created. So domain means a name with extension. You can give any name. I'm giving zoom.com. You can give any name. Then select the forest function level and domain function level list value. Next 5 times install. Automatically it will restart. With this machine will become DC. So how to check it? Go to the command prompt, type it net space accounts. So the computer role name will be shown as primary. So this is how you will check the DC machine. So when you make the DC machine, your preferred DNS IP change to loopback. You change it back to the DC machine. IP address and preferred DNS should be same. Then after that, I have written to remove the ADDS. Don't do that. That will be required at the end of the course, last day. So don't remove it. Everyday practical will do on the domain model, like every company uses only domain model. So let me show you now the practical. So first of all, this is your machine in which we made yesterday full screen, yes. And by default, administrator is account is created, which we logged in now. So this is called your server manager console or dashboard. So this console was not there earlier. So it is introduced from 2012 onwards. So now first thing you need to make sure that first go to your PC, right click property and check this machine with server OS, yes. And it is in the work group, yes. So now what you do first, give some simple name to your computer, because here some complicated name is there. If you don't change it, no problem, but it is easy to remember. So first to change the computer name. So how to change the computer name? Go to the PC, right click properties. The machine is with server OS and it is in work group. So to change the system name or give some simple name to your computer name, click on change setting, then click on change. Here you give in computer name some simple name. So I'm giving this as a system one. In the notes, wherever system one is there, that is your DC, which we have to make now. So I'm giving my computer name as in place of this complicated name sys1. You can also use any name which you feel easier and simple. Compulsory restart. So the name will change to, after changing the system name, restart the machine. Now you can check the system name. So how I change it? One more time I'm showing you. Go to PC, right click properties, click on see here. It has become simple name. Change setting, change. Here you write computer name. Okay, okay. Restart the machine. Over. System name will change. So I hope first thing is clear to you. So our machine is with server OS. It is in work group and we have given some simple system name. First thing is over. Now check second thing, IP address. So IP address can be given from network icon. Select the network icon, right click properties. Here, click on change adapter setting to give the IP address. So here LAN card is showing cross mark, means it is not connected to switch. So go to your OS, select your OS, right click on this, go to the settings. So I repeat, select your OS which you have installed 2012 or 16, exactly same steps. Go to your OS, right click on that, click on settings. Then your LAN card means network adapter. So by default, it is connected to internet, NAT. You connect to the switch. Custom means switch. To the our switch, it has to be connected. So you have these many switches. You connect to one of the switch. So I connected here VMnet 1. So your LAN card, what I did, go to your OS, right click property setting, select the network adapter. By default, it was NAT, change it to custom. In custom, you can select any number. So by default, VMnet 0. So I took VMnet 1. Okay. So now it will get connected to the switch. Now the cross mark will be gone. See here. Now we can assign the IP address on this LAN card. So now, one more time I'm showing, go to the network icon, right click properties, change adapter setting. Now your LAN card is not showing cross mark because we have connected it to the switch. For that, I went to OS, right click settings, click on adapter, change it from NAT to custom and any number. So I've selected VMnet 1. Okay. Okay. Now cross mark is gone. Now you can assign the IP. Select this, right click properties to assign the IP address. Select the LAN card, right click properties. Then go to the IP version 4 properties. Now on the server, we should give static IP. Whether we have configured DHCP or no. So on server, static IP should be given. So for that, right click property, select the second option, obtain the IP address, following IP address. Use the following IP address means we have to manually assign. So I'm using for simplicity 10.1. Then press the tab, it will take subnet mask according to class A. Then come to the default preferred DNS. What IP you are giving here, same you assign because in the same machine, DNS also will get installed. So IP address and preferred DNS you keep same, or IP is also assigned. Now we can begin with the practical of making this machine as a domain controller. Okay. Now, how do you open your server manager console? Now we have checked our machine. Simple name is given, IP is given. So here you can see this is how you can open your server manager console. So today onwards, everything you have to do from server manager console or dashboard. You can also open like this. Press the Windows key. You will find server manager. Open it. Now we are going to make this machine as a DC. So here you see on the tools, did you find any Active Directory services? No. Here you see any Active Directory and DNS? No. And you can check your DC. Go to the command prompt. I'll make the size bigger. Now you go to the command prompt, type it net space account. So if it is a DC machine, it will show computer role name as primary. But here what it is showing, computer role name is showing as what? Server. Server means it is not a server. It is a machine with a server OS. So this is a machine with server OS. So it is showing that. So when it shows computer role name primary, it means that has machine, this machine has become the primary domain controller. Primary means domain controller. Domain controller here server means it is a machine with a server operating system. You check here. So once it has become the DC, here automatically it will show what? Domain model. Here this machine is in work group. So we have to work in domain model. So to make it domain model, first we need to install the ADDS and make that machine as a domain controller. So how to check whether it is a domain controller? Domain controller means server. So when you go to the command prompt, type it netspace account. Here computer role name should show primary. When it is showing primary, it is a server, means domain controller. Now when it is by default, when you make it as a machine with the server OS. So when you go to the command prompt, it will show by default server. Server means it is a machine with the server OS, but it has not become the domain controller. When it becomes the domain controller, at that time it will show primary controller. In the computer role name, it will show primary. Okay. See, I repeated twice, Nancy. So first you go to your network icon, properties, change adapter setting. If it is showing crossmark, you go to your OS, right click settings, select your network adapter, your LAN card, change it from NAC to custom, and here any number you select. Then say OK. Now crossmark will be gone. Then you assign the IP, select it, right click, properties. First go to the IP version 4, then properties. By default, it will be like this. So select here this second option, then assign the IP. 10.0.0.1 I am giving. Press the tab key. It is class A. So it will take default 255. This 00. Then here you write it. What IP you are written here for machine. Same IP you write in the here. Write it also preferred DNS IP. Is it clear? IP address in preferred DNS should be same. Okay. Now we will make this machine as a DC domain controller. So here automatically what will come? Domain. Now in the computer, now it is a default machine with a server OS. So by default, when you install the server OS, it will be in work group. Now I'm making this machine as a server. Server means domain controller. So when you make the domain controller here, it will show domain model. And as well as when we go to the command prompt, type it netspace accounts, it will show computer role name primary when it is become the DC. So how to make the DC, you see here. Open the server manager console. So today in the theory, what we have discussed, first install the ADDS. So to install this, you open the server manager console or dashboard, click on to install the application or any services. You click on add roles and features. So you see here under the dashboard, what are the services till now installed? So did you find any ADDS and DNS? No. Here, any Active Directory names are there? No. Now first install the ADDS. This is your flag notification. So click on add roles and features to install the ADDS. So today we discuss first you have to install ADDS to make domain controller. So click on add roles and features. Click on open the server manager console. Click on add roles and features. Click on next 3 times. How many times you have to click on next? 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Now here so many Active Directory services are there. We are going to work on this MCSE course on Active Directory domain service. So select only second service. Don't select other services. Otherwise your system will become very, very slow and frequently it will restart automatically. Because these are very, very heavy services. So the Active Directory domain service, we have to select because our course MCSE is based on this particular service. So don't select other Active Directory services. You select only Active Directory domain service. Click on that option. It will show this window. Click on add features. Now which service got selected? ADDS, Active Directory domain service. Then click on next. Next till you get the option install 3 times next. Now install it. Now are you getting any yellow mark here? Is there anything? White means everything is fine. So below that, before that, anything was there? No. Is there any DNS is there? No. Any ADDS is there? No. So now we are installing the ADDS. So what will come here? You check. So you have to wait till it completely installed. Don't close while it is installing. It should completely filled up to 100%. Okay. So select this. Now, did you find here one Active Directory domain service? ADDS. So till now any DNS got installed? No. Which service got installed? That it will show under the dashboard. So ADDS is got installed. But now here you got yellow mark below the flag. Yellow mark means this service what you have installed, but something is pending, something is remaining. Means it has not become the domain controller. So it has not become the domain controller. So if you check here, net space accounts, did it showing computer role name primary? No. So it has not become the DC. Now go to your computer and check here. It has become domain model? No. So just when you install the ADDS, it will not become the DC. Now, but here some Active Directory services got installed here. See, earlier the first service was component service, but now once we have installed the ADDS, Active Directory consoles came here. Okay, so these consoles we can use to control and manage all our users in computer after you make this machine as a DC. So to make this machine as a DC, what you have to do? Are you seeing the yellow mark on the flag? Yes. So click on this option. Click on the yellow mark or click on the flag. Flag here is the notification. So if you want to check, just keep the cursor here. It will show notification. So click here. So can you see the option here? Promote this server to domain controller. So what we have discussed in theory, first install the ADDS. So just installing the ADDS in which machine, that machine will not become server. We have to make it. Server means domain controller. Now we are making the domain controller. So while configuring the domain controller, domain get created. Now we are configuring the domain controller. So while configuring the domain controller, domain get created. So here, three options are there. So we have 5 sessions of Active Directory. So in the second session of Active Directory, we'll be discussing this, when to use the first option, when to use the second option. Today, we have to use the third option. So if I tell you now when we should use first and second option, you will get confused. So today you just remember to make it as a domain controller, you have to use the third option. What is the third option? Our last option, add a new forest. So when we want to make it as a domain controller, click on the yellow mark, then this window will come. Here you select the third option. Our last option, add a new forest. Are you getting the next option highlighting? No. So now when you configure the domain controller, domain need to be created, a domain get created. So here it is asking, domain means DNS name. Now it is asking you give the root domain name. So when we configure the domain controller, the domain get created. So for domain is given, it is a logical boundary, which we can't see, but it is a boundary which is represented as triangle, under which all devices will work with a common DNS name. So the domain name means DNS name. So is there any DNS service got installed? No. Now it will get installed. Whether I install any DNS? No. So here select the, click on the flag, click on the promote this server or promote this to make as a domain controller. Then by default, first option is there. You select the third option. You select the third option, add a new forest. In root domain name, you write some domain name. Domain name means a name with extension, any name with some extension. Now next option is highlighting. Are you following everyone? Are you following? I am repeating so many times. Okay, next. Once the next option is highlighting, you click on next. Now this line is going on means the page is loading. Now page got loaded. So now you go to the forest functional level. It is optional, not mandatory, but it is recommended. So you click on forest functional level, drag down and select it. Which series is the lowest value? 2008. So that in the future, in the coming days classes, we'll be discussing the backup of DC. So select here forest functional level as least value, so that in the future, if you configure the ADC, the backup of DC is ADC. So we can use any OS from this series onwards. So if you don't change it, you have to use this OS only. If you select the list value, you will get more option. You can make your ADC from 2008, 12 or 12 R2 like that. So it is recommended, just select the forest function value, list value. Same way, select the domain functional value, list value. Now here, which service is getting installed now? DNS, when we configure the domain controller. So don't uncheck this box, otherwise you cannot create a domain controller. A domain will not get created. So by default, it will be checked. Now you have to give the password. So this password for that, now when we configure the domain controller, complete domain information will be stored where? In the centralized database file, which is ntds.dit. So now that ntds.dit file will get created. So for that, we are assigning this password. So what is your administrator password? That same password you continue. So don't give multiple password, keep single password. So this is the password for the ntds.dit file, which will be creating now. Next. Now here you have to wait. NetBIOS name will come without extension. So here it will come only Zoom. I taken domain name zoom.com. So NetBIOS name means only Zoom. Next. It will automatically should come. We should not write manually in NetBIOS name. Now here your database file is getting created in C drive Windows NTDS with the sysvol folder. Next. Now everything, whatever we have given, it's showing. If you want to change it, you go to previous and change it. Now it is okay means click on next. Now install option will highlight. So if you click on install, this machine changes from work group to the domain model, and this machine will become the domain controller server. So using this server, we can able to control and manage all the users and computer. So it's a very, very big service. So now it will take about like 3 to 4 minutes to get the login screen. So first it will check all the things. It's a very big service. After that, everything is fine. It will automatically restart. Then to get the login screen, it will take about 2 to 3 minutes. So completely about now 3 to 4 minutes it will take. So we have to wait. We should never cancel it or we should never close it because it's a very, very big service. And in my case, my laptop is having SSD hard disk. Still, it will take time. So please wait. Don't leave the session. So we'll see now. It has become the controller. So we don't have to do anything. Automatically, it will restart. Now see here. Now see here. You got the login screen. Now so much changes. Earlier it was only administrator, but now it has become domain administrator, domain model. So every company will do like this. One server they have to maintain. Now this has become the server. Now see here, yellow mark gone. Yes, now everything is fine. Now the page is loading. So now here, How many services got installed? ADDS and DNS. These are your consoles. Now see here. This has become the domain model or not, you check. This has become the domain model or not, check. Go to the PC properties. See here. Earlier it was completely workgroup, but now showing domain. So the machine or our network is changed from workgroup model to domain model. I hope you are following. So now you check here, go to the command prompt, type it, net space accounts. So this is the most easy and best method to check domain controller. Go to command prompt, type it, net space account. So the computer role name will be showing primary. When it is showing server means it is a machine with a server OS. When it shows primary means it is become the domain controller. So this is what you have to remember. I hope you understood today's session. So when we make the DC, one problem is there here. The preferred DNS IP will change to the loopback. So you have to change it compulsory. Otherwise, next practical you will get the difficulty. So go to the network icon, right click properties, go to IP version 4. Just change this to your machine IP address. Earlier we have given 10.1, but it will change to loopback. Okay. So change it back to the machine IP address. Your preferred DNS should be same. Now just to disable and enable it. So you will get here your domain name. Our domain name, what we have given, zoom.com. So it comes. So with this, successfully we have completed our network as a domain model. So tomorrow we will have the session because it is in the afternoon. No? So tomorrow I will have the session. Tomorrow I'll tell you day before, day after tomorrow, session will be there or not. Tomorrow I'll inform you. I know tomorrow is a big festival, but since we are doing online sessions, so I'll be taking tomorrow session and tomorrow I'll inform you. Day after tomorrow session will be there or not. Okay. Because of the Dashera, I'm saying. So if I take tomorrow, I may not take day after tomorrow. So tomorrow I'm taking. So I'll confirm it whether I'm taking or not day after tomorrow. I'll tell you tomorrow. Okay. So that's it for today. Thank you, everyone. So if you have any questions, any doubt, you can ask. Okay. Thank you. See you tomorrow. So I'm closing the session. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow session is there.